Hello and welcome to ADHD Mums. In this podcast, we tackle the tough, often unspoken realities of motherhood, neurodiversity, and mental health. There is a moment in some school meetings where the language changes. It's subtle at first, and you walk in thinking you're going to be talking about support, adjustments, and then different words start appearing: safety, impact on others, capacity. We've tried everything, and you can feel the shift before you fully understand it. You start thinking, how did this go from help? Because it feels like they're preparing to move my child out of the school. If you've been in that situation, this is the episode for you, because today we are unpacking that shift and what actually has to happen before a school decides that the child is the problem. Joining me is Ren Wilson. I have been super excited to talk to Ren because her guest expression form was so intense. And I was like, this is a woman that I want to see go. Ren is a ADHDer. She's raising autistic children with various different support needs. She spent 18 years working inside education. And I also love the fact that on her guest expression form, she says that she's been, air quote, that parent in the room, the one who asked the uncomfortable questions. And I was only devastated that you lived in Victoria because I was like, let's do this with PMS and a wine because
Oh my
I got some
God.
shit to say.
Dabble in a bit of perimenopause too, Dar. The rage.
So Ren really gets how behaviour is framed and reframed inside systems because not only has she been that parent, but she's also worked in the education system. I have never been so excited for a mini-series in my life.
Yeah.
It has been Christmas Day waking up.
Well, when I was actually applying, I was on a trip to Bali with my son and we're at the airport and he's like, come on, Mum, we need to get boarding. And I'm like, yeah, I've just got to finish this. Like, it's so... You talk about being excited. I get excited when you have people that are genuinely understanding of inclusion and what's going on in our community and the reality that our kids and so many of our families are facing when it comes to inclusive practices in education.
So let's go just straight in, as we do, to the moment where you realised that the language in the room had shifted about one of your children, where it was no longer about support, it was about risk. What happened? What did it feel like?
Feels like your whole world's crashing in around you because you obviously look at your child through a beautiful lens. You understand their behaviours, you see them for who they really are. Whereas I think sometimes in a school setting, like our kids do have challenging behaviours. That's a part of their diagnosis. It's a part of their identity as neurodivergent children. And I think schools, obviously being in education myself, I don't want to, shit can educators because I do understand the realities of how stressful our jobs are, and class sizes now are, the highest that I've ever seen in 18 years. And the amount of students that are on, individual learning plans and things like that, I understand those stresses. But I think for me, when I heard the words, they danced around, we've done everything that we can to support, when they suggest alternative settings to better suit your child's needs. Safety planned. I think that absolutely killed me when they were taking words that she said in dysregulation. And, most of us understand, mums that are raising our beautiful kids understand that dysregulation, those kids could be spitting out anything, and all the F's and C's and all the words. But in that moment, that's the language that she has to express how she's feeling. So, like in the lead up to our safety planning meeting, there were wellbeing days that they suggested that she stay at home. So the increase in the unofficial or the gentle exclusion. And I think too, you go from speaking to the classroom teacher and maybe the wellbeing or diversity or whoever's in that role of inclusion. You speak to them and then you see a shift of emails that get responded to within, 24 hours to 48 hours, or every third email getting responded to, or you're only getting emails from or correspondence from higher up in leadership that are APs and principals. And, you're sitting there going, and the walls are closing in because you know what's coming, you know what's happening.
Yeah, it's kind of like being performance managed at work. You're like,
Really, it really is.
Support you and help you in your job. And you're like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're here just to find all the things wrong with me so you can get rid of me, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that deficit view as well, like it's just so predominant in our schools of, they look at a behaviour that a child has And, we understand from our lived experience that that behaviour is a part of their diagnosis, and we know the reasoning behind it, and we can see the steps leading up to it. But I think when they're looking at those behaviours in a school, they're really pathologising that there's some malicious intent, or that child needs to change, or we need to fix that behaviour, rather than, how do we support this child and build capacity? Like, a 6-week plan isn't going to fix, I've got a daughter that absconds. It's not going to fix her absconding, and it's not going to, impact her regulation needs. We're working on things we've been working for 2 years. And, the last fortnight we've had a shift, and the shift has gone from, rather than her running away, she puts her head against a wall. Like, we've worked so hard for that, but that is a win because that's what it looks like in my family. Whereas I guess from that real deficit model is that, no, that's an adverse behaviour that causes disruptions, that's aggressive, it's this, it's that, it needs to change, it needs to stop, we have zero tolerance. And it's like, well, don't you think I've tried that?
Isn't there a saying that's like, if you want to look for good, you'll find it. If you want to look for bad,
Yeah,
you'll find it. So
yeah,
it does shift from like, this is all we're doing, this is the positives. And then it can
yeah,
kind of move to, well, they're doing this and that's unsafe and that's impacting others. And now it's just like, if you look
yeah,
for bad, you'll find it.
100%. The curiosity is gone. They don't want to know my child anymore.
And whew, I said
Yeah.
to my hubby, I was like, I'm doing 4 interviews for the miniseries this week and I've got PMS. And he's like, fuck. He's like, how's your editor going to go? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to editing outrage. So I loved your form when you said that you have been the parent in the room, labeled too much and that parent, because I am that parent. I am the justice warrior, cannot tolerate bullshit. When I said before about if you look for good, you'll find it. If you look for bad, you'll find it. When do you think they start that shift? Looking from good, how we can support, to now we're just looking for everything negative to build evidence. When does that start, do you think?
When the behaviours become bigger, when the dysregulation is more noticeable and creating more of an impact on the class. I think if I look at both my children who present so completely different, my son has perpetually fallen through the cracks. He's not a behaviour issue. He will sit there and he is the mega master of masking. He will sit there and he will pretend to work. He knows exactly what he has to do to look like he's busy, so people leave him alone and teachers leave him alone. So he's just always run there. I've never had a safety plan for him or anything like that, because the observations of him meeting IEP goals, which I don't think are done with fidelity and are done as well as they could be in a lot of educational settings, they go, yep, he's compliant. We're just looking from a compliance base. So once our children aren't compliant, and once they require maybe a higher skill set or more demands on the teacher's time, or those are big adverse behaviours that are indications of a child in distress and dysregulated, are rather seen that we need to really quickly either move this kid on or remove them from that class, or I've heard throughout my 18 years, put it back on the parents. Like, that's a very common comment. Put it back on the parents. And I think when you're getting emails from principals, when you're getting emails from higher management, that's them putting it on you. Like, my daughter's safety plan was put on us, like, if she's dysregulated, you pick her up. We were getting phone calls within 40 minutes of dropping her off at school. It's putting the responsibility on the parents, when I think, at that time I'd pinned them and said, well, what are you getting in supports? Like, what's the sort of financial, what's a dollar sign? And they said about $34,000. Now, I'll probably get pinned for saying this, but I get infuriated when I see the dollar signs that the kids are getting. And yes, I understand that that doesn't afford them one LSO to be with them all the time.
Ren, I have to back up.
Yeah. I might get in trouble for this.
I
Is the rage building?
I have to know the context. When you said the 34,000, are you referencing the NCCD funding for autism?
Yeah. Within the school. Yeah.
But you're referencing 30 a child.
Yeah, obviously depending on their support needs.
You
but that was the
fucking
dollar
kidding
sign.
me?
Yeah. And there was another student in her class that a very similar presentation that I can only assume was another $34,000. Yeah.
Fuck is that?
Yeah.
My head is fucking exploding.
Yeah.
The way that it has always been referenced to me is I thought it was some fucking dollar coins that they get.
Yeah, I know,
like,
right?
it's a favour. I thought
Yeah.
it was like they get $7.50 for having one of my kids there. I've got 3 of them, so I'm bad at maths, whatever that is. but they can't make that ends meet. It has to be split. They won't get any one-on-one. We can't give them a break. We can't do anything. But the bare minimum,
That's not can't, we
we don't
won't.
even get a
Yeah.
we don't even get a fucking plan, an individual plan for 3 kids, and you're telling me they get $34,000 per
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
What? Oh my
I'll say
fucking
can
God.
get, before you blow your mind, before your brain drips out your ears, can get up to. So it changes depending on the support needs of the child. So the school will apply for it. So in a state school, it's a disability inclusion profile. So state school's going to be different. I probably should have disclosed that at this point in time she was in a Catholic setting. But we're talking thousands. We're not talking $7.50. I think the thing that I find infuriating is that there was a shift years ago when I first started teaching. The money was assigned to a student. The student would get allocated that, well, not money, but it was time. So they would get a teacher's aid for, maybe 4 periods a week. And they go, all right, well, let's put them in maths, English, science, or, that sort of thing. But then it was an exclusion sort of practice because they were segregating those children and having that LSO. Yeah. So then it's been changed to, over time, that doing these big, disability profiles and the IEPs and the implementation of those, and then the school gets allocated funding, and then the school pulls the funding. And this is where I and many parents in our community have an issue with.
I thought they were pulling $7.50 though. I didn't realize
they're not pulling $7.50, but that does pay for ES wages. But I can see a shift in that a lot of schools, and it's great, don't get me wrong. It's great for the class as a whole. It's not great for our kids, because if they have challenging behaviours and you're in a class of 30 kids and the expectation is that's a shared a shared support is that ES staff member, I can see kids like my son falling through the cracks because he's not getting that support. But little Johnny that doesn't have a diagnosis, doesn't have an IEP, might just be a highly energetic kid. You never know.
Yeah.
Is getting the support because of those behaviours.
But a burning one. Let's say I'm sitting on, I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it too. The school that we are at is incredibly neurodivergent. Whenever I go there, I'm like, wow, what are we looking at here? There's so much going on. I chose it for that reason, right? My opinion from reading the research is that neurodivergent kids do best with other neurodivergent kids in a well-managed environment.
Yeah.
I went and found that. I did the best I could, right? You're looking from shit. But
Yeah.
so we have an incredibly high amount of kids on the NCCD funding, and there is a lot going on there. But I'm confused. If you had a school that was receiving a lot of funding, why would they not want to keep all of the children? Like, you're talking about excluding them.
Yeah.
It must be bang for buck, because they must be thinking that kid is not worth the 34 grand. Like, is that how they think?
Well, I think the way that they view it is that, well, that $34,000 doesn't pay for the EAS staff member that they're going to need in their classroom every day. Like an ES wage, I don't even want to guess how little that is, and it's disgraceful how much they get paid.
So let's get back on track for a bit.
Yep, sorry.
What behaviours do you think most commonly trigger removal, suspension, formal exclusion? When we're moving from how can we help you? It's all beautiful here to this, that, you're going out. You're on one-way path out. What do you think triggers it off?
Yeah, I think most of us have experienced the big behaviours are typically the ones that are viewed as adverse behaviours or that disturb the what's the word? Like the ecology of the classroom. The physical aggression, the property damage, they might use threatening language. So all of those that, rather than looking at a student in distress, are seen as, you've just got a violent child and, we can't accommodate them safely here. So let's work on getting them out. That might be refusal as well. They might be refusing to follow instructions, especially, a lot of students with a PDA profile. We have PDA profile in my classroom, and I know at my home. And I even know I could ask my daughter when she, if she's quite dysregulated, I could suggest something to her that she wants to do and her answer will be no. And it might be followed by a fuck off. And I know that that's my time to fuck off. But if that happened in a school setting and you've got a class of 30 students and a student goes, no, fuck off, then, because we're still so stuck in that authoritarian view of discipline, well, that needs to be fixed. That needs to be reprimanded. There needs to be a consequence. Not, my goodness, what led us up to this point? Why is this child so dysregulated? And how can I co-regulate and support them?
So, Ren, we are going to go to a listener question with someone who's got this exact scenario. This is a question from Megan.
The moment I realised that school wasn't working for my child was when after multiple suspensions, they'd reduced his hours to 1 hour a day, and the supports that they were providing were just not working. And in my last phone call with the principal, she said that my son was regulated during his last incident and was choosing to behave like that. And in the end, I couldn't do it anymore. I gave up and I pulled him out of school the next day.
I like actually have goosebumps right now because
It
haven't we
sucks.
all, like, so many of us have been in this position and know how isolating this position is. And you can hear in her voice, like, I just want to rock up at her doorstep with a bottle of wine and her favorite food and just go, you know what? I'm here for you, babes, because we have been there. But then when you hear what she says, like, the supports in place weren't helping. Well, if they're not helping, then they weren't the right supports in the first place. Like, and then the pathologizing of a child's behavior, that he was in control. I assume they were in control and doing it intentionally. Like, just that deficit view of behavior that's defaulted to is just, it makes me so fucking angry.
Totally. And this is her child. Like,
Yeah,
I can take some criticism on myself,
yeah,
but if someone's pointing at a child, that's her whole world. And
yeah,
saying that he was regulated and he chose that, they've blamed him. Like,
yeah.
you can't I don't even know where you could go with that because they clearly either don't know or don't want to know or whatever it is
No,
that they are like, how do you even come back from that? I just thought
yeah.
you have to leave.
Well, I know in our daughter's experience when they were using terms and things very similar to that, I was asking, well, what's happening in the classroom? What's leading up to this? Because I know my child. And you know what? Like I said, I appreciate that our children can have big, big behaviors and big moments of dysregulation, but that doesn't mean that they're bad kids. And it doesn't mean that it's intentional. And it doesn't mean that they're sitting there scheming on ways to, how they can fuck shit up. And it
Exactly.
doesn't mean that as their parents that we have the fucking answers either. I just get really frustrated with these scenarios because if they're sitting there and they're telling me that they've put the supports in place and they're not the right place to support my child, then you haven't put the right supports in place. Have you referred to OTs? Have you referred to speech therapists, behaviour specialists? Have they come in and supported your staff and have your staff had PD on neurodivergent behaviour or, heaven forbid, the polyvagal theory of regulation and language around declarative language and how to support it? Like, I just think there is such a huge wealth of knowledge out there. Like, it's fucking 2026. Learn some of the strategies. Like, none of us woke up when we had our children and, we've birthed these beautiful babies and send them off to school. None of us knew what was coming. And we've
Yes.
had to learn and we've had to adapt. And we do it because we love our kids and we want our kids to be viewed and accepted for the beautiful beings they are. Like, they're not the dysregulation that other people see. Like, I know, and I always say this, you can't punish a neurodivergent child more than they punish themselves. And I know the number of nights where my daughter might have told a teacher to fuck off or has absconded, and after she's had a bath and we've had snuggles and we've gone to bed, she can be in her bedroom crying and so distressed because she is so ashamed and she's so embarrassed by her behaviour. And, we're so lucky that we can unpack that with her and she will talk about that with us. But I just, this mum here, I want to high five her for being so brave to take her son out of that environment and go, enough's enough, because our kids put up with enough trauma, enough discrimination, unconscious bias. Like, I'm not going in there saying that educators are bad people. They're not. They're under the pump. They have big classrooms, but there's also not the PD that's out there, the neuroaffirming PD. Like, listen to our voices when we're telling you our experience. You could get onto any parenting page, on Facebook or any other forums, and you will see this story repeated over and over again. And where do our kids go? I was, and this sounds atrocious to say, I was lucky that during the time when we had this situation, that we were going through a second cognitive assessment. Initially, our child was borderline. And then after this cognitive assessment and all the dysregulation, they destroyed her at this school. She had an intellectual disability, so we were able to put her in a specialist setting. But I often wonder, like, what happens to those kids? And, the stress that this parent must be under. Where do
What?
our kids go? Is there a magical fucking place I don't know about?
They go to mum burnout town. That's where they go. Choosing to homeschool because you love it and you believe in it is a different thing. There are
100%.
so many people who are homeschooling, the list of questions I've got, and they are like, they don't want to be. They've given up.
No,
Like,
there's no other
I had a
options.
guest on the podcast, Tanya Waring. She's a lawyer. She gave up her law whole career
Yeah.
to advocate for one of her kids full
Yeah.
time. It's
Oh,
out there.
please tell me again that our children's behaviours are a fucking choice then.
It's but
Yeah.
the best teachers that my kids have ever had have, funnily enough, always had neurodivergent kids.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about with giving teachers more PD is absolutely, in my view, the answer. Because if we had more ability for them to actually do PD that was helpful and free and gave them time to do it, like actually educate them in their PD days, they shouldn't have to do it after hours. They've got so much on. The
Yeah.
school should provide that. Come back to work a week early or whatever it is, paid, and we're going to do a whole week on neurodivergent or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Because give them the skills and give them less kids, right? So they can actually do the things.
Yeah.
Because without that, they've got no hope, the poor
No.
people. Like it's
Yeah.
awful what they're going
And
through.
it might sound wild, but fuck off the funding. Just put the money, just put it into teaching, reduce classroom sizes, have an ES in every state full stop, and look at the way that we're delivering curriculum. Have neuro-affirming teachers that have had the PD on how to respond to different types of behaviours and the way that we view, reframe the fucking behaviours. It's not authoritarian anymore. It doesn't work. It never worked. The research is out there. Build relationships. A class size of 30 is just ridiculous. In that class of 30, if you've got 6 kids plus with neurodivergent needs, how can you physically be able to give these kids what they need? There are so many flaws. We're letting down our teachers, we're letting down families, and our kids are suffering for it. Like, how many kids are traumatized from the education experience? It should be the happiest fucking times of their lives. But if I look at my kids, I had my daughter at her old school send me a video because she couldn't talk. She had just shut down that much, crying, saying, I don't belong in this world. I don't belong anywhere. And that's in grade 2. Like, it was so raw for her. What grade 2 kid says that? They shouldn't have that. And my son as well, he goes, what's the fucking point to going to school? They don't care what I do. Like, and I know that majority of educators would hate that if a student in their classroom was feeling it, but I just don't see how there's going to be any changes in the current systems that we have in place. There needs to be a huge shift.
I want to get back on track for a moment.
Sorry. Yeah.
It sounds like what you're saying is that we have a child, let's say, for example, they're receiving the funding, they know the child is autistic, whatever it is. They're working with the parents, they're working with the child to try and get the accommodations right. At some point, you were talking about the behaviours disrupting the compliance, the classroom, getting too hard to handle. At some point, someone says, somewhere off in the staff room or wherever it is, I think that kid's got to go, right? That's what it sounds like you're saying. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it might not come in the staff room. I'm a little bit higher up than that.
The social justice warrior in me has to ask. I've heard so many listener questions and they sound like great parents, right? We have mums and parents and kids who are doing their bloody best and they are pushed out or given no options, right? Pushed into a corner. They've got nothing left. They have to homeschool. It's like a sliding door moment. On the other hand, I've seen many kids get so many bloody chances. At what point and who picks that? I'll give you an example. There was a kid at one of the schools my kids have been at, and they come from an awful background. It's fucked. Like, you feel awful, right? It's like it's horrible for what these kids are going through. Child safety aren't there, so they're still with that parent. The one I'm talking about is driving their kids home drunk. That child is going around the school, taking them away, choking them, telling them to kill themselves, actively assaulting, and I think risking kids' lives. That's my opinion. When we have a mum who's on the listener question, who's desperate for support, desperate to make it work, heartbroken, why is it different? Why is she in that position? And why is that child there when it could potentially be a dangerous situation? And I'm not saying he can't go to school or be educated. I'm just saying, is this the right setting for him?
Our kids are neurodivergent. Our kids are autistic, or our kids have ADHD. They have an invisible disability that kids can't see. I think there is such a bias. And even as an adult, I experience discrimination all the time.
So why are some parents pushed out and some parents not? Is that just the principal's discretion?
I would also say that if you've had a child that's perhaps come from a really, really dysfunctional upbringing and they had agencies connected to them, I just think the paperwork might be slightly different when it comes to exiting and supporting these kids. So I almost feel from an administration side of things, it's possibly harder if a child has had a trauma background. And I could be wrong. This is just from my observations. But I think for our community, the difference is also that we carry a lot of shame as mums, because we hear and see the looks from other mums. We hear that, like, yes, your child has a right to be in my class, but my child has a right to learn, and my child has a right to, not listen to your child swear. So we take all that on, and that real, I call them neurodifficults, that real neurodifficult culture of comply, fit in, or fuck off. So, we feel a lot of that shame. I think if we all dug our heels in and stopped answering the phone calls an hour in to go pick our kids up, if we said to them when they said modified timetables, said, no, our kids are going to be there. But then in the flip side of that is, what are we doing to our kids? We're traumatizing them more. We're putting them in a place, like it's a shitty cycle. And I've seen it, I've heard it, I've experienced it, where they will talk to you about policy, but they don't tell you the whole policy. And, reasonable accommodations. Well, what's fucking reasonable to a neurodifficult is totally unreasonable to me as an ADHD, and to my children. There's just such huge gaps in understanding. There's unconscious bias, there's flat out bias and discrimination. The tolerance levels, like you can almost see when you say to people that my children are autistic, they roll their eyes. It's not fucking cool to be autistic. I don't care what TikTok or Instagram says. It is fucking hard, and the burnout is real, and our kids are struggling, and we are at a crisis point. And I just really think when you're at a crisis point, you've got a burnout mum, it's easier to bully her with policy, and it's easier to push her out with the words. It's almost like you're shaming her child's behaviour. You're essentially shaming her parenting skills.
I do think you've made a really interesting point. A lot of us are quite conscientious about our kids, particularly with schools, because we want our child to receive support at school. We want them to be happy there if we can. We want them to go easily. Like, there's a lot there to it, right? You're so invested. But I have seen a few parents that have been not allowed on school grounds because they've, let's say, for example, abused the principal. And let's say they get a phone call, come pick up your child, they just don't go. Or their child gets suspended, they don't care, they just drop them off again. Then I suppose you actively have to kind of like engage in the process to be removed from the school, right?
If the parent does just flat out not answer phone calls and things like that over an extended period of time, then it gets handled above. So the principal can then make a referral above for it to be dealt with. It sort of like gets put, I guess, to the higher beings in leadership. And there's still obviously process as well. But yeah, it's such a fine line that you walk, because you want to be supportive of a school that doesn't want your child there. And you want to try and reduce the opportunity of them, I guess, indirectly and directly traumatizing your child by pathologizing those behaviors, by not implementing IEPs. Like, how many times have we gone and said, well, this is on the IEP. Was this followed? Oh, yes, it was. And it's like, well, prove it. How does it? There's a breakdown of trust. You can't prove that, a teacher has asked just your child, if they need assistance or if they need help, or if your child's in the right space to respond to that assistance. Or, I just think there's just such a breakdown on so many levels.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. A lot of people debate this in the ADHD Mums Facebook group around private versus public or independent. Do you think there's any differences?
In my experience, no. My son, we changed 3 schools in his primary, and all 3, I don't believe, accommodated for him accurately, effectively. Nothing that I found noticeable. I just think the whole system as a whole is broken. It's potluck. The demographic that you live in also helps. The understanding, and that's what I think it comes down to, the understanding of true inclusion. And you've got to put the feelers out within your community and what people's experiences have been. And I guess depending on the support needs, it is going to be a different experience for everybody. Whether I've paid $8,500 a year or had him in state school at nothing, they've all let him down. And even, with the Catholic education system. So when my daughter was pushed out in a space of 8 weeks, and this is going to piss you off,
That was
there
great.
was about 6 students that were pushed out in a very similar way to my daughter. It was like this massive exodus through safety plans and all this bullshit. And there was probably about 4 of us that made official complaints to Max. So Max is the Melbourne ADOSI, so the overseeing regulator of the Catholic education.
Oh, yeah. And then what did that happen?
Sweet fuck all. That's what happened. Yeah, I put in a complaint in 2023 and still haven't heard anything. And when you put in complaints and when you go to higher up, you come up against roadblocks or you get ignored. Like, it's the same thing as well. And once again, it's still a load that the family has to carry. I have to to be there for my kids and keep my kids going, yet try and fight a system that needs to change with people that don't want to change it. They just want our kids to disappear and go to these other magical settings where they're going to be catered for.
Yeah, or the mum, they just shove it back to the mum. Let's say, for example, we sacrifice our career, and then if we decide to break up with our partners, we have then no options, a career. If you were if you were in this situation, you feel like it might be drifting into they are managing your child out as opposed to helping them or supporting them. What are some indicators that is happening or some strategies that that mum or parent can do?
I think first and foremost, looking at the IEP that's in place for your child is really important. So making sure that, majority of them should go with the format of short-term goals. So those short-term goals, making sure that there's dates on things and there's specific timeframes. So it might be that, you know, teacher supporting your child to feel safe coming into the classroom, just as something easy, and what does that look like? So what strategies the teacher will use? Will there be a gradual release where the teacher after maybe 6 weeks will then, test if the student feels comfortable coming in? How do we check that that's actually happening in a classroom? And I think a lot of the time we have that trust that they're an educator, they're doing, what's written in the IEP. But I think definitely asking for things like fidelity checkers. When has this worked? What's successful? What's not successful? And if your child is having big behaviours and they are dysregulated, then I think you're definitely within your rights to say, well, let's review the IEP because it's not working. And if you can't spot it as a parent, because I do know that that's an additional load, then asking the school, what services can you provide? Can you provide a behaviour support practitioner that maybe could come in and do a functional behaviour assessment and give recommendations? And then ask how how they implemented those recommendations. It can be time consuming. Like I said, the energy for a parent to advocate for these things, but you're allowed to ask you're allowed to ask if you've got a care team, can you get your speechy, OT, behaviour practitioner, can you get them in there to observe what's going on? Can they have a meeting with the parent? Because I can guarantee that every child wants to do well. They want to do well. They want to feel included. And I think if it's as simple as a relationship breakdown, because obviously if staff are overwhelmed because of the big behaviours, it might be as well. There's no connection there. So, I know with my daughter, if she doesn't know somebody, she's less likely to comply to what they're asking her to do. So it might be that, they check in with your child outside of class and get them to talk about their special interest. And they do that for 2 minutes every day for 10 days to try and build rapport. But I would think that as soon as they start using words, we've done all that we can, or the supports aren't working, then I would bring it back, put it on the school and say, well, the supports aren't the right supports, obviously, because we're not meeting the child at the point of need.
Agreed.
And show me. I've got a son that's got a dysgraphia. And dyslexia, like, I want to see the work. What does that look like? What does that, we differentiate. The kids can choose between, an easy level, a moderate level, a hard level. Well, what happens if my child can't come in at the lowest? Then what does that look like? Or what do if as soon as you start asking, what does that look like? And if they can't produce it, then it's not happening. I think too, like, really looking at the behaviours before escalation. So if your child is having big behaviours, then my question would be asked, what happened before that? And I think sometimes teachers interpret that as you looking to put accountability on the teacher for the behaviour. But, I know with my daughter, 20 minutes before she's completely dysregulated and, might be absconding or might be being aggressive or violent, in the 20-minute lead up to that, there were lots of signs that she needed a break, that she needed some sort of intervention or support. And I can guarantee that the majority of kids would be like that as well. We just need people that are qualified to be able to pinpoint that, chuck it in an IEP, teach the teacher how to do that and how to look at that, and, really implement these IEPs with fidelity. But then as a teacher, from the teacher view, I also realise that the time constraints and the workload within the classroom makes that difficult. But, there just really needs to be that shift.
I love what you said. I had a quick one that jumped into my head. I just want to run by you. I was thinking when they are getting to this performance review place and they're reviewing the paperwork, let's say, maybe it's a good time for the mum to document all the good things that have happened as well. Like send an email and say, hey, blah, 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 I had a great day today. It was great that he managed to do this, this, and this. Like, and say to the teacher, well done, but you're actually creating a paper trail of positivity as well. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I love that.
Because I was thinking, if they're just documenting everything he didn't do, it would look really
Yeah.
bad when you were reviewing it. But what about if you documented all the good things?
Yeah. And it's difficult, though, to make that choice, though, isn't it? Sometimes, because I know that my brain goes straight to, we need to fix this. But, it's definitely, and I talk about the deficit view, but yeah, we really need to congratulate the teachers for what has been accomplished and the kids as well, acknowledge the hard work that they're constantly and continually putting in.
Well, that's my strategy to not be that mum. Because I do have high expectations.
Yeah.
And so I make sure I do acknowledge what good happens. So it's not like Jane can't be happy. It's like Jane can be happy. I just need some basic accommodation.
Just do what I ask you to do.
It's like I'm a control freak. So, good luck. Anyway, okay, Ren, thank you so much. This has been such an interesting interview. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing.
No, that's okay.
I think this has been a great episode for anyone who's ever felt blindsided in a meeting. If you've arrived thinking it was about support, walked away and thought, I think that was something bigger, I wasn't prepared, it's probably not you. It probably was something bigger. And when the language starts to move from support to safety, sometimes that shift can be something that you weren't expecting. And I think this episode has been great to address that. If you have any questions for Ren that you would like answered, go down to the show notes. You can see the audio and the written submission. If we get enough questions on this topic, I will ask Ren very kindly and nicely to come back, because this is the only episode in this series that is going to focus on this managing out of behaviours. If you feel like there was other areas that haven't been touched enough, I can grab Ren back if she's available. But I really appreciate your time, Ren. This has been such an interesting interview.
Oh, thank you. No, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Quick announcement. Did you know that we have an ADHD Mums shop filled with resources designed just for you? These resources are packed with answers to the most frequently asked questions I get sent in via email. Everything from understanding ADHD and autism to practical tips for daily life. There's also a free assessment tool. If you're wondering about ADHD or autism for yourself or your little one, don't forget to check out the free assessment tool under free resources section on my website, adhdmums.com.au.